AskReddit by Blancheniche 37. What did the pandemic ruin more than we realize? My sense of purpose or meaning. I haven't felt this nihilistic since I was a brooding teenage girl, 20 years later, and now it's actually more of an existential hell. This is in relation to actual virus plus politics plus societal response. People are just mean. Most people have careers and work at companies that if either disappeared tomorrow, the only suffering would be from the employees without salaries anymore. This one resonates with me the most. I'm a completely different person than I was in 2019. IDK if better or worse, but my overall outlook is darker. I'm still struggling to give a shit, if that makes sense. We lost a Halloween that was on a Friday with a blue moon. We ain't getting that shit back ever. Truly a once in a blue moon opportunity. This might just be local, but where I live, a shit ton of businesses closed. I mean, half of them were closed. Not just because of the shutdown, they were closed permanently. I think the pandemic was the nail in the coffin for a lot of businesses that were already on the edge of just making it, and others have continued to struggle because, well, things are just more expensive. I've noticed I no longer go to sit-down restaurants because my grocery bills are so expensive. Why go spend $40 minus $50 for one meal when it costs $150 minus $200 every 2 weeks for groceries? It just doesn't make sense anymore for a lot of people. I think the dining experience changed as a whole post-pandemic. Lots of places had to resort to DoorDash type businesses to make up for losses, and that in itself has changed the dining experience. The health system is wrecked. Way too many nurses got burnt out and left the profession. The frustrating thing for me is that I am just old enough to remember back in the late 90s early 2000s hospitals were laying off nurses en masse. It seemed incredibly short-sighted at the time, and no one today is acknowledging how it's finally come around to bite us. Independent smaller DIY music venues never really recovered. This has really left a void in my life. I used to go to house shows a lot as well, and those are all gone unless it's a college band. I'm hoping it will slowly recover. Speaking of college bands, they're all cover bands now. There's hardly any new musicians playing, mostly original music. It's so weird. Edit. Some of you are responding like this. You're on course. That's not how it works in my largely populated city. People's driving is so out of whack. My only concern is to make it home in one piece. I have worked in insurance claims for years and years. I don't talk to people anymore, just manage repair shops. But whenever I am checking the facts of loss, for the past 3 years, things are just batshit. There are hundreds more single car accidents every year in my area than there were before the pandemic. So I'm not sure if people are drinking more or if it's a mental health thing or what. But before the pandemic it was all rear ends from commutes. Now it's people driving full speed into their garage walls and guardrails. People seem so much shittier in large group public situations now. I don't know what it is, but etiquette in places like a movie theater used to be standard, but every experience I've had lately has been horrible. People talking, sitting there on their phones, and other just generally bad things. I've heard the same about concerts, but haven't been to as many myself. I've heard from others where people used to be polite, help each other up in pits and stuff and so on. They now just don't give a fuck. It's like people are just more rude now for some reason. I'm really interested to know if this is happening everywhere or if I just live in a shitty rude ass place. Dude, people treat movie theaters like their living rooms now. It's absurd. And it's all ages too. I understand really young kids, but the parents don't even bother to control them. Last movie I saw, adults were having full-on conversations the entire time. It's rude as hell. People have completely lost their manners. When I saw Halloween, a family came in, I shit you not, with a noisy baby in a stroller. Every 20 minutes, the mom was walking back and forth in the front aisle with the baby in her arms. I went to go get Taco Bell at 10 o'clock and it was closed. I'm sorry you had to go through that. We are in this together. Don't give up. Young people's desire to go into healthcare. We won't realize it for a generation or so, but healthcare in America was already chronically understaffed. The pandemic burning out medical professionals and discouraging young people from going into healthcare is going to have a negative effect on the quality of healthcare, not only in the United States, but other hard-hit countries, too. Combine that with the long-term health effects of COVID along with an ever more obese and chronically ill population, and yeah, it looks pretty fucking bad. My social work life. After living like a hermit for 2 years and working from home, it's taking me a long time to go out like before. My husband just informed me I haven't left the house in 4 days. I had no idea. The cost of living is pretty fucked. Food prices just keep going up. We're buying less than ever, and more generic, less premium version of everything, and yet we're paying easily twice as much as our far more luxurious and full cart of groceries we were getting in 2010. Any type of 24/7 business is just a memory. I can't trust the hours of any business on Google anymore. Places just close whenever the fuck now. Time perception 2019 was 3, soon to be 4, years ago. Edit. Thank you for all the likes and award. This is the most karma I've gotten on Reddit, so kind of kicking myself for not using my main account lol. My brain still thinks that 2019 was last year. I don't know if you've watched The Good Place, but it's like we've been stuck in the dot above the I and Jeremy Bearimy. Night shift people lives. Nothing is ever open late anymore. Just went into the night shift recently and realized this. No food. No errands. There's the gyms and your home, and that's your life. Feels like it's a more to each their own sense of living. People don't appear to be as connected as before the pandemic. The pandemic brought me much closer to my wife and son. It also made me incredibly jaded, cynical, and much less trusting of everyone outside of these walls. Essential versus non-essential employees, better known as those who had to show up physically in person, and those allowed to stay home. Biggest division in the workplace. Mentally it will never be the same in the workplace. And how quickly we went from essential workers and heroes back to burger flippers as soon as it was time to switch out of pandemic relief mode. Used car market is completely fucked, as are flight prices. My vehicle was written off back at the start of the year, other guy's fault 100%, so my insurance company had to give me replacement cost of the vehicle. It was a 2015 with 186,000 kilometers on it. I was expecting maybe between 5 and 10k, and if I argued I might be able to push it as high at 12. First offer was $21,000. I was so dumbfounded I decided to just take it before they realized what a stupid mistake they made. As a teacher, I can say that it's definitely affected kids in a way people don't realize. Kids who had their first year of school, or even second, during the pandemic act quite different than kids who had a normal introduction to school. Many of them seem to have fewer social skills and higher anxiety than kids from previous years. I work at a high school and it's also very noticeable at this age. It's as if with each grade level lower you see an exponential decrease in maturity, discipline, and social skills. The younger they were during COVID, the harder it hit them. Specifically, it's more noticeable in the boys. The girls have had less tolerance to stress and anxiety, though it has greatly improved since returning, and they are mostly receptive to help and take advantage of the resources we've provided. We were prepared for the mental health crisis that would be the return to school and upped our staffing for mental health counselors. We were not as prepared for the total disregard for authority and risk-taking behavior, but we've addressed it by hiring our disciplinary counselor full-time. He is basically a life coach for our frequent flyers in detention. All in all, it's been effective, but we are not without our issues. It ruined me on traffic. For one glorious year, As an essential worker I had the roads almost entirely to myself. It was beautiful. I feel this so hard. I got so spoiled with my commute, now it's back to the bullshit. Price of eating out. Fast food is now almost the same price as a cheap sit-down restaurant pre-COVID. I'm in my 40s, but the pandemic really cut the list of friends I socialized with in half. We got out of the habit of seeing one another, and now that things are back to normal, we just made a habit out of not having dinner dates and stuff like that. When I realized this was happening, it made me look back and realize that I was the one who used to plan things and reach out. I made the conscious decision to stop being the one who always reached out, called and texted, and I now see that I'm only in touch with half the people that I used to be. Edit. I am not talking about socially awkward, depressed, introverted people. If anything, I'm the introvert, and I still always made a point to reach out. I'm referring to people who still go out, celebrate holidays and birthdays and socialize. Just not with me anymore apparently. There are only so many times I can try and make plans with people who don't do the same with me. I cannot be the one putting 100% into a friendship. No school on snow days. Our town directly said that snow days are a joyful part of childhood and they would keep snow days. I'm sure it also has to do with power outages, if some kids don't have power and can't tune in, or if teachers from other towns don't have power and can't teach, but I thought it was a nice sentiment. The lockdowns happened during my last semester of university. I've never had an in-person job, only work from home, which I realize is a blessing but also makes it feel like IDK, like it's not real. I have no work friends, have never met my supervisor in person. I do all my work from my desk in my room. It feels like pretend. I worked for almost a year during COVID for a company without meeting anyone in person. It was like a really dull video game until I met people. Now it's like a really stressful video game. Sometimes I break eye contact in meeting just to remind myself I'm not there with everybody on the meeting. I'm really alone. I'm not sure if anyone else feels the same way, but my perception of time hasn't really returned back to normal since then. I still have this weird feeling I'll be going back to some old job I'm not going back to. It was just such an abrupt end to a lot of things we thought we were taking a short break from. My perception on money. I work so hard to pay off debt, save up for a new house, get promotions. Now with the rise of housing costs and inflation, I feel like money is literally such a made up thing and I have no control over anything even with all the right decisions. 2 steps forwards, followed by 3 steps backwards. We were never in this together. I'm in healthcare. We were heroes when needed, but when we aren't, we are flexed off the schedule without pay. I'm sure the office folks that aren't on the floor providing the actual care get paid though. I no longer recommend going into healthcare for anybody. IDK if it's like this everywhere, but certainly where I live a lot of the stores and restaurants still have shitty hours. They close a lot earlier than they used to before the pandemic and there's no sign of them ever returning to their normal hours of operation. Which really sucks for people like me whose schedules only allow for late night shopping trips. Another thing I've noticed with certain restaurants is their quality of food and taste have suffered dramatically. Some of my favorite places to eat aren't nearly as good as they used to be. My waistline and my mental well-being. It's my own fault, but I was about 6 months sober and working out daily before COVID. A few days later, half my department and my co-manager are laid off. I'm suddenly working 14-hour days in extremely stressful conditions. Walking my dog and working out took a backseat to a shot or 2 of Jack to calm my nerves and whatever comfort food I could get from Grubhub. Life is better now, but I haven't quite kicked all the bad habits I gained from those days. Stress affects me differently, and I'm a lot more sensitive to it than I used to be. I'm so sorry, friend. I understand about stress. I have anxiety disorder and the pandemic really set me back with my healing. Hang in there, we are all doing the best we can. You are not alone. Children's education, mental health, coping skills, and socialization. My wife is an elementary educator, and it's shocking how far kids regressed during the pandemic. By almost every measure, this generation of kids is in big trouble. I'm optimistic that the trend will right itself over time, but it's really sad to see. My daughter was 4 when the pandemic hit, and turned 5 in the summer of 2020. We tried to do online kindergarten. Do not recommend. It was awful. She was saying things like I can't do it, I'm not smart, I'm a bad kid, every day because she just couldn't sit there and look at a tablet all day and learn to read and write. It was a disaster, and my mental health has never been worse. She's 7 now, and they let her restart kindergarten in person last fall, and she's doing well in 1st grade, but holy guacamole, are she and her peers struggling with social and behavioral stuff. God help them. Grocery shopping at 2 AM was the best thing ever. Now I have to shop with the rest of you hooligans and it fucking sucks. I work 2nd shift, get off at 11 PM. Used to do all my shopping after work, now everything is closed by the time I get off and I have to do all my shopping during the day. I hate it so much. Used to be plenty of options to grab a quick bite to eat on the way home as well. Half the time even McDonald's is closed by the time I leave work nowadays. Nothing being 24 hours anymore is awful.